Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Sick Pay Made Simple in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Alice, and I'll be presenting today's webinar. So let's take a look at what we're going to cover. So I'll start with an introduction to statutory sick pay, a little bit of an overview, the eligibility and some of the qualifying conditions as well. We'll then move on to recording sickness. So there's a couple of ways of how you can record this in Sage 50 Payroll. I'll show you all of those different options. And then about how to adjust your employees' payments. So how to adjust your employees' pay to accommodate for this statutory sick pay. And I will also have a little section on troubleshooting, so what to check, where to check in the programme should you have an issue arise with that statutory sick pay. And I have put together a little quiz in the form of some polls to launch, just to test your knowledge on statutory sick pay as well. So let's move on to that introduction. So what is statutory sick pay? So SSP. So SSP stands for statutory sick pay, and this is the minimum amount that you should pay to qualifying employees when they're off sick. It's paid to employees when they're ill and unable to work, but you may pay them more if you've got a company sick pay scheme. So the rate of statutory sick pay, this is a weekly rate of £116.75, which has of course recently increased at the beginning of this tax year, 2024-25. And that's for a period of incapacity for work for up to 28 weeks. So that's the entitlement for the employees. So let's look at those qualifying conditions that an employee must meet for this sick pay. So employees must have an employment contract and have done some work under that contract as well. So if you've hired somebody new and they ring in sick before they actually do any work for you, they don't meet that qualifying condition. They must have also been sick for 4 or more days in a row, including non-working days, and this is known as a period of incapacity for work, or PIW. And you will hear me say PIW quite a lot during this webinar. So PIW is a period of incapacity for work. The employees must also need to be earning an average of at least £123 per week. That average is taken in the 8-week period prior to the first day of sickness, or it's taken from any periods that they've worked, should that be less than 8 weeks. They also need to give you notice and proof of illness when needed as well. And what I mean by this is a fit note or a statement of fitness to work, which could be the proof. So if a sickness lasts more than 7 days, you can ask for proof of illness. But if it's 7 days or less, an employee can self-certify their sickness instead. And I have linked more information just at the bottom of this slide on eligibility, as well as what to do if an employee does not qualify for SSP. So that link just goes to the gov.uk information, the employer guide there. And then just a few more kind of general rules for SSP as well. So the SSP payment itself is only going to be for qualifying days. So the employee's normal working days or contracted working days, for me, for example, that's Monday to Friday. So Saturday and Sunday for me would be non-qualifying days. You would pay SSP on the employee's normal pay date, so no need to change that up. The first 3 qualifying days are known as waiting days when no SSP is going to be payable. So the employee would go on sick, but the SSP would not kick in until the 4th qualifying day of the absence. The exception for this is known as the linked period. So this is when there's a period of sickness with a gap of 8 weeks or less from the previous period of sickness. And the sickness itself doesn't need to be related to the previous one. As long as that gap is 8 weeks or less, they won't serve those 3 waiting days again for the new PIW. And the sick pay would kind of kick in and resume from that first qualifying day. But remember as well, that PIW would still need to be 4 days or more in order to qualify to be SSP. And you'll see more about this when I do the demonstration in the programme shortly. But before I do that, we're going to move on to how to record sickness in Sage 50 Payroll. So there's a few ways that you can record the sickness in the programme, and this just depends on the way that you'd prefer to do it. You can use the absence diary, which is found in the employee's record and absence, or you can also find this in the SSP tab in Enter Payments. The other way is via the Quick SSP option, which is found from your payroll links and employee tasks. So Quick SSP also has the option to print a report of the information as well. So all of the dates and things that you've inputted, it's a great thing just to keep for your own records if you wish as well. Now, regardless of which way you use, whether that's the absence diary or the Quick SSP, it's going to produce information that will show on the absence diary. And this will show in the form of various letters or symbols, depending on what that day in the absence diary is. So the first letter is an X. This indicates a waiting day. The first 3 qualifying days of a sickness in the PIW. So lowercase means it's going to be for a current period that hasn't yet been updated and paid, so you've not updated the records basically. Or if it's a capital letter, this is going to be for a historical period that has already been updated and paid. The next letter is a P. This is for a paid SSP day. And same goes with the lowercase being current, capital letter being historical, and therefore already paid. The next symbol is going to be a dash or an equal sign, and this represents a non-qualifying day. So as per my example before, if an employee worked Monday to Friday, you would see these symbols over the weekend as they aren't qualifying or working days. A red letter A represents sickness absence which does not qualify for statutory sick pay, and this is usually because it's going to be 4 days or less, so it's not quite long enough to qualify for SSP and hasn't formed that period of incapacity for work. And the last symbol here is a W. This is a day marked as SSP withheld. So this would appear after all of the 28 weeks entitlements being paid to an employee, or if you've ticked a box to withhold the SSP for another reason. And keep an eye out as well during the demonstration, because some, if not all of these symbols will be coming up, so you can see what they look like on the absence diary. And then just on the right hand side, to determine what qualifies as a qualifying day for an employee, you will need to set up a working day pattern for them. This means you'd be able to use it to record waiting days and paid SSP days, and the pattern consists of N's and Q's. So N meaning non-qualifying day and Q meaning a qualifying day. The employee's waiting days and paid SSP days would only be recorded on the qualifying days as per their pattern. And once that sickness is recorded, you can check this in Enter Payments. You can see how much it's paying, how many weeks it's paying as well. And from here, you also have another absence diary, as you can see on that screenshot, where you can extend, edit or delete any current sickness if required. And the sick pay is going to be calculated up to your process date. So same with all statutory payments, it's only going to pay the employee what's calculated in the current pay period. And any other days that fall after the process date, they would be paid in a future pay period. So that was a little bit of an insight into what SSP is, how to qualify for it, and how you can record it as well. But I am going to bring down the slides, dive into the demonstration, and we'll look at recording that SSP. So I'm logged into Sage 50 Payroll, and the first thing I'm going to do is change my process date. So from my payroll tasks, I'll click on Change Process Date. So I run a monthly payroll, and my payday is always the last day of the month. So 31st of May is the correct process date for me. And what this means is any sickness entries up to the 31st of May will be used in calculations for SSP this period. And I did mention there's a few ways to enter that SSP. So I'll first of all show you how to do it using the absence diary, which we'll find in the employee's record. So employee number 1's been off sick. I'm just going to open up their record and go to the absence tab. And here is that absence diary. Now, before I do record any of the absence dates, I do need to set up that employee's working day pattern just to determine those qualifying days. So to do this, from further information, I'm just going to click on SSP. And in here, I'll find the qualifying days tab. So for this employee, I can see that there's already a pattern in here. This is probably the most common one for a Monday to Friday working pattern. So it goes Sunday to Saturday. We can see the Sunday and the Saturday are both non-qualifying days, as an N. And then in between the Monday to Friday, we've got 5 Qs, and they're showing as qualifying days. So if these are the employee's working days each week, it's going to repeat that pattern weekly, starting from this pattern date. Now this date's not too important, to be honest with you, as long as it is in the past before the absence. And if this working pattern as well is not correct, you do have the option of choosing a different one from this drop down here. So I've got a couple of examples here. This one for someone who works weekends, for example, the Sunday and the Saturday are the qualifying days, and the Monday to Friday are non-qualifying days. This one for someone who works Monday to Wednesday, we can see those days there are qualifying days. But if you find there's not one in here which suits your employee, you can actually create your own bespoke pattern as well. So you can type in this box here. I could type in whatever pattern I wanted to, depending on the employee. And if your employee works shifts maybe, so let's say 3 days on, 3 days off type of thing, you can actually build multiple weeks of a working pattern here as well. So let's do that one. We'll say the work 3 days, the off 3 days, and I'm just going to build that up just for a couple of weeks. And one more. There we go. So let's say they've got 5 weeks worth of shifts. I can enter all 5 of those weeks. That's going to kind of work through that pattern, and once it gets to the end, it will repeat. So we've got that 5-day pattern there. Now, as you can see, the working pattern can become quite complex depending on the situation, but totally customizable in here. Now, if your employee does not have set days that they work, maybe they're a casual worker, in this case, HMRC guidance does allow you and the employee to agree on a standard working pattern for the purposes of the statutory sick pay. So you could pick one from here, from the list in the drop down. So we've got quite a few options in here. Or of course, you can just agree on one with the employee and type in your own as well. So I'm going to stick with Monday to Friday for this employee. I've just removed those other weeks by backspacing those letters. And I'm going to click on OK at the bottom. And I will get a message just to say that the qualifying day patterns have changed. Do I want to continue? Yes, I do. So this means now that this employee's qualifying days and SSP days will only land on weekdays. And now that that pattern is sorted, it's time to record that SSP in the diary. So I've got the absence diary here. One way to do this is by clicking diary entry just below the calendar. This defaults as SSP and sickness, so no need to change this in today's example. And it's just going to be a case of entering the dates of the absence, so the from and to dates. So my employee was off on Monday the 6th of May to Friday the 17th, so they had a couple of weeks off. And I do also have the option of adding a comment if I wish. Anything you want to, you might just want to pop on that they've got a sick note, for example. And this would show on the absence diary and any detailed SSP reports that you run as well. But of course, you can leave that blank if you wish. And when I click OK, I can see that absence there now on the diary. And this shows some of those symbols which I was talking about a little bit earlier as well. So first of all, notice that all of the letters are in lowercase, as this is the current unupdated and unpaid period. So we've got 3 X's showing us the 3 waiting days for this PIW. And after the employee served those 3 waiting days, we can see the paid SSP days kick in. So we've got the Thursday and Friday paid there. Of course, as per the working day pattern, the weekend and non-qualifying days with a dash. And the rest of that absence, the Monday to Friday, showing 5 more paid SSP days. And it's important to make sure that the sickness is continuous as well. So if the employee has not returned to work, just make sure you've got the 4 or more consecutive days to qualify for that SSP. So that is how easy it is to record that absence. But if you did record something by mistake, maybe you've got to remove some, There is a nice quick way that you can do that, as it is current absence. So since it's still lowercase, I am able to edit this. What I can do is left click and drag on those dates. Oh, there we go. And once I've selected that date range, I can right click and click none. And that's going to remove that absence nice and quickly and fix any mistakes that you might have done. And a kind of similar way as well to quickly add that SSP. Again, left click and drag on those dates, but this time we'll right click and go SSP and then due to sickness. And then you've got that same option to pop on a note if you wish. And we can see we've extended that sickness again. So I'll just save my record. And that's the sickness recorded in the first way. So this is via the absence diary. And a little bit later, you will see the SSP automatically calculate. But first of all, let me show you that other way of recording the sickness, which is via quick SSP. So first employee sorted. I'll move on to employee number 2. They've also been on sick, so I'm going to use the quick SSP option. I would recommend this one for initially setting up sick pay for an employee. So when you're first inputting that absence, quick SSP is probably the better option. Whereas the absence diary, that's actually great for extending or continuing that sickness, as you saw there, just a case of selecting the dates. So I've highlighted employee number 2, and from the payroll link section, I can click on recording sickness. If I can't see this, you can resize that section just in case it's hiding under there. But you do also have recording sickness in the employee tasks. So I'll click on that there. And this is the same information that you'll be entering, just essentially the dates for the sickness. But this time, all of that information, including the key dates and average earnings, it's all going to be in one place for you. So I'll enter the sickness dates. For this employee, the 8th of May. And again, similar to the last employee, it was to the 17th of May. And I'll click on calculate entitlement. And straight away, I can see that entitlement calculated at the bottom for this employee, which is actually that standard rate of SSP, £116.75. Now, the absence is longer than a week, so you might be wondering why it's only showing a week of SSP. But if you remember those 3 waiting days the employee must serve, they don't have any pay for SSP with them. You've also got the option of checking the qualifying days on the left as well. So if you did need to check them or change them, you absolutely can. And you've got key dates on the right. You've got an average earnings figure as well, which payroll's calculated for the employee. So remember, that has to be at least £123 per week. This employee's is £461.54, so they're absolutely fine. Now, if I was curious how the payrolls work that out, how has it got to that figure? I can click on earnings during set period, just in the bottom left. And we can see that 8-week period. So payroll uses any of the payments in this 8-week period to calculate the average. So my employees had 2 monthly payments of £2,000, and it's come to this average figure here of £461.54. And my favourite part of this option as well, probably a bit sad, but the print section in the bottom left here, this does print off a really great summary report of all of the dates and information in here, which will look a little bit something like this. So if you do want to keep it for your own record of what you've inputted for the employee, you do have that option there as well. But for now, I'll just save and close this. Oh, there we go. And that is the SSP entered. So now that I've entered that, I'm going to move on with my pay run itself. Now, quick note with SSP, if you do pay your employees in arrears, more particularly probably for weekly employees, I would recommend that when you record the sickness, you record for the period that you would normally be paying them for. That way you can kind of pay the SSP in arrears as well. So for these 2 employees, I'm just going to right click and open up Enter Payments. And I'm going to go to that SSP/parental leave tab. Now for this first employee, we can see another absence diary in here. So there's another way that you can find it. We've got those same figures, letters and symbols on the absence diary. But this time in here, we also have the SSP payable, so the amount that it's calculating, £163.45, and how many weeks it's paying the employee as well, which in this case is 1.4 weeks. So although they're off for 2 weeks, we can see they did serve those 3 waiting days in the beginning, and they kind of don't count towards that. So each day here is 0.2 of a week. So we've got the 1 week here, and then the 0.4 here for those 2 Ps there. And moving on to my next employee as well, still on the same tab, so the SSP parental leave. It's showing their SSP weeks at the bottom as 1. Now let's say they return to work after the sickness, so they're back into work for this week here, but maybe they got ill again towards the end of the month. You are actually able just to, edit that sickness in here as well. So just a reminder of how you do that. I'll left click and drag to get that date range. Right click, SSP, and due to sickness. And I can see I've got those paid SSP days now as well, just edited at the end there of May. Now notice this is a linked period. So because it's within 8 weeks of that last PIW, the employee isn't serving those waiting days again. So this PIW is showing us 4 qualifying days of SSP, instead of the 3 waiting days and then 1 day. So they weren't actually off sick again. I did just want to show you that linked period. But just to remove this, I'm going to left click and drag those dates, right click and click none. And then just to show you another one of the symbols as well. So let's say they were only off for the 3 days instead. I'd select those 3 days, add the SSP, but this time we can see it's showing as red is. So it's just showing as absence rather than SSP. Now this is because the period of sickness is less than 4 days, so it does not qualify for SSP. As I said, just showing as absence. Now if I extended it by 1 day, for example, I can see that does change that PIW into SSP. And I'll just remove this again. So that was how to record SSP, and just a little bit about how to check that it's calculating in Enter Payments, how many weeks it's calculating for, etc. And we'll just come back to the slides for a little bit of a recap. So a couple of ways that you can record the SSP via the absence diary, which is either in the employee record and the absence tab, or in Enter Payments on that SSP/parental payments tab. The other option on the right there is the quick SSP. So this can be found in your payroll link section or in the employee tasks. Once you've recorded that, you'll then see the absence diary entries with some of the letters and symbols, lowercase if it's current sickness, and capital letters for historical sickness. And remember, I'm just on the right there, you will have to set up your employee's working day pattern as well. Also, you can edit or delete current sickness if required, and you can do that using the absence diary. And in Enter Payments and the SSP tab, you can also see that SSP payable amount and how many weeks the SSP is paying for as well. And that does bring us on to the next section of the webinar, which is going to be all about adjusting your employees' payments to consider this statutory payment. So the SSP will calculate automatically, as you've seen, but you will need to make some adjustments to the employee's pay, or you'll end up paying their wage plus statutory sick pay, which is going to be too much. So I'm going to show you a few more common scenarios that you might come across, but just bear in mind this is very company specific. It does depend on any specific policies or schemes that your company has around sick pay and how your company does things as well. So the first option that we're going to show you is Make Up Basic. This is for companies that might have a policy in place for an employee to get full pay for the first 6 weeks of sickness, for example. And Make Up Basic allows you to reduce the employee's normal pay to take into consideration the amount of sick pay that's being paid, and therefore you won't pay too much. And the next option is a manual adjustment. So if you don't have a sick pay scheme, or maybe the sick pay has run out for the employee, so they've already had their entitlement, you can adjust the payments manually. This involves working out how much to pay the employee for the hours or days worked, and there is a little calculator in Enter Payments which you can use for this. So we'll just dive straight back into the demo, and I'm going to show you these adjustments. So I've still got my employees who are on sick selected, and I'm just going to go back to Enter Payments for them. So Payroll Tasks and Enter Payments. And for employee number 1, I can see I've already got their full salary in the Payments tab of £2,000. And for this employee, I'm going to use the Make Up Basic option because they're still covered by the company sick pay scheme. And I would like to top up their statutory sick pay to the full basic pay. So step 1, make sure that their full basic pay is in the Payments tab. And step 2, I'm just going to go to the Summary tab. And as I said, we can see that full wage, but currently it's adding on that sick pay. And the total gross pay is too much at the moment. So what I'm going to use is the Make Up Basic option here to make that adjustment to their salary. So Make Up Basic says you've selected to make up to basic the statutory payment for this employee. To do this, the hours and number value of salary will need to be reduced. Do you want to continue? Yes, I do. So I'll click yes on that message, and straight away I can see that total gross pay reducing down to £2,000. And if I go back to payments, I can see it's done this by reducing the hours and number value of the pay element here to accommodate for that statutory payment for the statutory sick pay there. So now they're getting that sick pay, and Payroll's worked out how much salary it needs to top it up by in order to get to their normal kind of basic pay. And that is Make Up Basic. So that is the adjustment done for my first employee. A fairly straightforward adjustment to make. Obviously the programme does that calculation for you. And that's for employees who are part of a company sick pay scheme which specify them to receive a specific amount for a particular period of time. So I'm going to click on Save Next and just move on to my next employee, so employee number 2. And let's assume that there's no company sick pay scheme for this employee. So I'm going to go to SSP and parental leave. We've got that SSP at 1 week for this employee, so 5 days of the SSP to pay, as of course it takes off those waiting days. Now I would like to manually work out the basic pay to pay this employee for the days that they've worked. As I said, my payroll is monthly. My process date is the 31st of May. And this particular employee would have a total working days of 23 in May, as per their working pattern, which is Monday to Friday. Now bear in mind with working patterns and things, this can differ from employee to employee. It does just depend on their contracted hours or days. But for this employee, out of those total 23 working days in the pay period, they've worked 15. So they were sick for 8 of those days. They've worked 15 of them. So the manual adjustment will allow me to calculate that out of the full £2,000 for 23 days, how much of that is going to be 15 days worth. So step 1, again, just make sure they've got the full salary in the Payments tab. And then to do that adjustment, I'm just going to click on this little calculator. And I'm going to do the days worked. So for this employee, that's 15, divided by the total working days in the pay period, which again for this employee is 23. I'll click equals and tab on my keyboard. And again, we can see it's reduced that hours and number value and ultimately reduced the salary here to £1,304.40. So the payroll's worked out that out of that £2,000 for 23 days, this is how much they would get for 15. And if I just quickly pop back to the summary tab, I've got that 15 days of pay there, along with that week of statutory sick pay too. So I'm happy with these adjustments. I'm going to move on with the rest of my pay run now. So I'll close enter payments. And there's just a couple of pre-update reports I would like to show you, just so you can see what the sick pay looks like on them. So a couple of my favourite reports here. We've got the laser, just the standard laser pay slips. So I'll preview these. And just make that full screen. And I can see employee number 1, we've got that makeup basic salary top up here, £1,836.55, along with that £163.45 sick pay. So that shows nice and clearly there on the pay slip, the total gross pay on the right as well. And then if I just scroll down to employee number 2, I've got that manual adjustment that we made. So this is the 15 days worth of salary and that standard 1 week there of sick pay. And another report here, just the payment summary part 1. If you don't already run this prior to updating the records, I would absolutely recommend to. It's a great summary of a lot of different values, including sick pay. So we can see here for the 2 employees, we've got their amounts of sick pay here, along with the total at the bottom. So nice and clear for that on there as well. So that was just the laser pay slip and the payment summary part 1. And for the sake of the webinar, I'm just going to skip ahead now and update my records. So always take a backup at this point as well. It's super handy to have a pre-update one. But for the sake of today, I'm just going to skip through that update records wizard. And we can see my updated date now is the 31st of May. So now that the records are updated, that sickness that we recorded before is no longer current sickness, but it's historical. So I won't be able to edit that now. So if I just show you what I mean, I'll go back into the employee's record and to absence. So we can see that absence diary again, but this time it's got capital letters, and that dash as well for the non-qualifying days turned into an equal sign. So we've got historical sickness here now. If I did try to edit this, so let's say I wanted to remove it, I would instead get an error message because it's historical. And as well, if I do just go back into the SSP information and look on previous PIW, we now also have that previous PIW information there for that historical sickness. So this is used by Payroll to determine whether the next period of sickness is a linked period or not. And just a little top tip, this window is great if you are troubleshooting anything to do with SSP. Great, so let's pretend I've finished May, I've done my payroll for May, and I'm just going to change my process date to my next pay date, which will be June. So last day of the month for me, 30th of June. And let's say I do need to add more sickness to one of my employees. So I'll go into enter payments, because again, we can see that absence diary in here. Again, it's historical dates, but just a reminder of how you would extend that sickness if you needed to. You would just left click and drag along those dates, right click, SSP, and due to sickness. And we can see these symbols and letters are lowercase, meaning it's unpaid. And providing that these dates are before my process date, these will be calculated in the current period. And a reminder as well, because it is a linked period, this employee does not need to serve those waiting days again. So that was adjusting your employees' payments. There was either the makeup basic option, which is for scenarios where you pay the specified amount to an employee, but you want to accommodate for the statutory payment. And then there's also a manual adjustment. So this can be used to calculate how much an employee gets for the days that they've worked in a period. And you can find more information at the bottom of this slide as well on adjusting normal payments as well to accommodate for statutory pay. And this does go for maternity, paternity, other types of statutory pay as well. So I do now have a little section on troubleshooting as well. So you might find that no SSP is calculating, or maybe the amount of the sick pay is different to what you're expecting. There are quite a few factors which can affect how the SSP calculates. So I've put together a little list of some of the main areas to check. Obviously, make sure the information in there is all correct, and you should be able to spot the problem from there and hopefully be good to go. So what to check? Well, the first one's the process date. So remember that SSP pays up to and including the process date. So if all of the dates of the sickness are after your process date, there won't be any sick pay calculating until those sickness dates fall into the current pay period. Second thing is the diary entries. So on the absence diary, what letters or symbols are appearing? Remember, if it's a red A, this means that the sickness is likely less than 4 days, and therefore it does not qualify for statutory sick pay. Or if the letters or symbols are capital letters, they've already been paid and updated, so they won't be paid again. And just a reminder of the waiting days as well. So this could mean that the statutory sick pay is showing 3 days less sick pay than you're expecting. And these will show as X's on the absence diary. And next is qualifying days. So if the SSP payable amount looks different to what you're expecting, but the dates are all correct, it could be that the wrong working pattern is assigned to the employee. So you'll just do that in the record, and from the further information SSP button, you'll have the qualifying days tab in there where you can double check that. And if there is nothing calculating, I would also check the average earnings in the SSP information. Remember, that does have to be above the average of £123 a week in order to be SSP. And then last main thing to check for troubleshooting is previous PIW. So that previous PIW tab in the SSP information, just double check all of the details in here are correct and they do reflect what's already been paid. Or maybe the employees actually already had their entitlement of the 28 weeks SSP. If they have had their full entitlement, the sickness will begin to show as W's on the diary, and W's meaning withheld, so it would not calculate anything. And I have attached a really handy article as well at the bottom of this slide that helps you kind of work through these different areas of the programme, checking different messages that you might be getting as well, just to help get to the root of any problems, or if you just want to double check that SSP. So I just want to show you that now. So it's called Statutory Sick Pay, a Troubleshooting Guide. This one's really great. There's different ones of these for each type of statutory payment as well. And if we scroll down, it's just going to ask you a couple of questions. You'd either say yes or no and kind of work through this. And it would just help you to kind of figure out what's going on and troubleshoot the issue as well. So just a reminder, that was called Statutory Sick Pay, a Troubleshooting Guide. Now that does bring us on to the last section of the webinar, which is the quiz. So we'll test your knowledge, see what you've learned throughout the webinar. Totally optional, but would be great if you did get involved. This quiz is in the form of polls that I will launch. So I'll launch a poll, you select your answer, and I'll share the results after a minute or so, along with whatever the correct answer is. So let me just launch that first poll. And that should be coming to you now. So on your screen, what is the weekly rate of SSP in the current tax year? So 2024-25. What is the current weekly rate of SSP in this tax year? Is it £109.40, £116.75, or £184.03? So I'll leave that open for about a minute. Most of you have got that right so far, so well done, but I'll share the results soon. So what is the weekly rate of SSP in the current tax year? Fab, it looks like everyone's getting that right, so I'll share those results. So we can see 2% of people have said £109.40. That was actually last year's standard kind of weekly rate for the SSP. But of course, this year it's the £116.75. So well done if you did get that correct. And that last one's kind of a little bit of a trick answer there. So £184.03. That's actually the standard weekly rate for parental payments. So paternity pay, maternity pay. I just wanted to see if I could catch you out with that one. So well done if you got that right. We'll move on to the second question now. Let me just launch that. And that should be coming to you now. So how many consecutive days does an employee need to be off sick for to form a period of incapacity to work, or PIW? So that's how many consecutive days does an employee need to be off sick for to form a period of incapacity to work? Is it 3, 1, or 4? So is it 3 days, 1 day, or 4 days? And again, looks like most of you have got that right, so I'll just close that poll now and share those results. There we go. So 14% of you have said it's 3 days and 86% of you have said it's 4. So well done to the 86% of you. It is 4 consecutive days. Remember, when I showed you the demo, if it was only 3 days, they would actually show as red A's on the absence diary, just meaning absence rather than statutory sick pay. So the correct answer is 4. Two more questions to go. So the next one, I'll just launch that now. And that's coming at you now. So what is the maximum number of weeks between 2 PIWs for the periods to be classed as linked? So what is the maximum number of weeks between 2 PIWs for the periods to be classed as linked? Is it 39 weeks, 52, 8, or 12? Most of you have got this right so far, which is great. So what is the maximum number of weeks between 2 PIWs for the periods to be classed as linked? So remember those linked periods that I was talking about. Great, I'll close that poll and share those results. So 94% of you have got that right with 8 weeks. So remember, as long as the gap is 8 weeks or less between 2 periods of incapacity to work, the employee would not have to serve those waiting days again. That would be classed as a linked period. So well done to those of you who got that correct. And last question, just to finish off the webinar. I will launch that now. And that's going to be, which of the following symbols represents a waiting day on the absence diary? Some quick responses there. So which of the following symbols represents a waiting day on the absence diary? Is that A, P, X, or W? Quite a mixed mark on this one. So which of the following symbols represents a waiting day on the absence diary? Is it A, P, X, or W? Great, I'll just close this one now as well. Looks like most people have voted there. And well done to the 72% of you who put X. So remember those 3 X's that were showing on my absence diary in the demo, they were the waiting days for the employee. A little bit of a trick because you'd think it would be W, to be honest, but W means withheld. So that's normally if the employees had their full entitlement of SSP, So they've had that full 28 weeks. The SSP would begin to show as W's on the absence diary, meaning withheld. Then of course P is a paid SSP day, and A just means absence. So well done for those of you who got those answers correct. Hopefully you've learned something throughout this webinar as well. But that is it for the quiz and it for the webinar as well. So that does bring us to the end of the main content for Sick Pay Made Simple. Now, before I do start to wrap things up, I would like to go through a little bit of further support with you as well. We've got loads coming up this month in terms of webinars. So 4 webinars, me and Duncan do these throughout the year for Sage 50 Payroll. As I said, loads and loads of stuff coming up this month, a lot based on pensions, to be honest. So we've got the basics of pensions, pension assessment, if you're wanting to know how to calculate pensions as well. We do have a pension calculations webinar coming up. So if you are interested in any of those, click register now or head to sage.co.uk/webinars and hopefully we'll see you registered for a couple of them very soon. We also have the Sage Help Centre. So all of the articles that I've shown you and linked on the slides, these have all come from the Sage Help Centre. You can search the knowledge base, access those support guides, watch recordings of the webinars and things, and should you need to, you can get in touch with the experts as well. And last piece of further support from me is going to be Sage University. So here you can set up a free account, you can access e-learning and bite-sized learning, as well as earning product certification too. So it's a great way to expand your knowledge on Sage 50 Payroll and other Sage products that you might have as well. Just a great way to expand your knowledge there. But that has brought us to the end of our Sick Pay Made Simple webinar. So I just want to say thank you very much for your time this afternoon. If you are leaving us now, remember you can download the handouts from today. These will include all of the slides from today's presentation. And feel free to copy and paste the Q&A as well if you would like to keep any of those questions or answers. And last ask from me, there is a short survey that you'll get as you exit the webinar. So if you do have just a moment to fill that out, me and the webinar team would really appreciate it. We do read every single comment, all of the feedback, and we do try to make these webinars the best that they can be. But that's it for Sick Pay Made Simple. So I can see there's still quite a few questions coming in. I'm just going to go on mute for a few moments to help the team with those last remaining questions, and I'll come back in a few moments to say goodbye. So I'll see you all very soon. Hello everybody, thank you for your patience there. So we have made it through most of the questions. I am going to answer a couple more after I've said goodbye. But yeah, thank you to my team behind the scenes there. You've kept them busy on the questions. And keep an eye on your emails as well for a recording of the webinar coming through as well. You'll be able to rewatch it as many times as you need. Watch the demonstrations again as well if you would like. But on behalf of me, Laura and Paddy, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully we'll see you on another webinar very soon and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.